Welcome back, my people. It's Jason, and I'm here to share with you guys some of my Bible study content. A lot of this study notes that I've taken in this book right here has come from YouTube videos, sermons, my own study, and just research that I've done. So I will link some of the channels where I got some of this information, or I will just reference the Bible verses which I use in here. And there's a lot of topics that I'll be discussing. So I'm going to be posting multiple videos, which you already see. Some will be up already. But for today, we will be speaking and talking about barriers that stop us from hearing God's voice. So the first barrier we'll be speaking about is the idea that we are so occupied and busy with things that have nothing to do with why you're here. And then we get physically and mentally tired of the things that aren't concerning the Lord at all. So that can be a major barrier as to why we're not hearing God's voice. So we can be busy with things like watching TV shows, watching movies, trying to keep in touch with social media, and just distracting ourselves with things that literally are stopping us from spending time with God. Barrier number 2 is that we haven't considered, what does God actually want me to do? So a statement I can leave with you guys is, it will be hard for you to hear what God has to say when you've already determined what you want Him to say. So if you already determine what you want God to say, how can you leave room for what He actually wants to tell you? So God doesn't want His voice to be a mystery. He wants you to spend time in His presence so He can speak to you personally. So you want to build a personal relationship. The whole point of following Christ is that we can build a personal relationship with our Father that created us, right? Barrier number 3 is that we spend so much time prioritizing things that shouldn't be prioritized. For example, intentional atmospheres matter for us to be able to hear from God. So an intentional atmosphere would be something like putting yourself around people who uphold the same values as you do, or people who are trying to grow closer to God as well. That will help you and your walk with God be stronger. So another intentional atmosphere could be, try to keep the area where you're trying to connect with God limited from distractions completely. So that's playing music that glorifies God, that is not talking about desires of the world, such as money, sex, drugs, women, all this stuff, right? So you want to keep yourself in an environment that is pleasing to God. Just think about what you're doing and think about, is God pleased by what I'm doing, or would God be disappointed in what I'm doing? An amazing story that we can read is in 1 Samuel 3 verses 1 to 9. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. At the time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was laying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call, lie down again." So he went and laid down, and the Lord called again, "Samuel." And Samuel arose and hurried to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call, my son, lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel again, and the third time, and he arose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" So Samuel went out, laid down in his place, and the Lord came and stood, calling at other times, "Samuel, Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant hears." What we can take from this story is that when Samuel heard his name, is that he got up and ran, displaying his swift nature in response to the voice of God. So we need to be like Samuel, and as soon as God calls our name, we need to respond swiftly. We need to be able to identify God's voice and know that when He's calling us, He wants our attention. So we give Him our attention, right? So a question I can leave with you guys is, what is your speed like when God tells you to do something? Now, I'm going to give you some comparisons to hearing God's voice compared to hearing your own voice. Now, comparison 1 is, when it's God's voice, it gives an assignment for His glory. When it's your voice, it gives an assignment for your glory. We can read this in Proverbs 25 verse 27. It says, "It is not good to eat much honey, nor is it glorious to seek one's own glory." Meaning it's not good to boast or for people to praise you a lot. You need to direct that praise to God and not yourself. Comparison number 2 is when it's God's voice, it can seem impossible. And when it's your voice, it traffics in your own logic, which makes you take the easiest route. And the verse we can take this from is Matthew 19 verses 26. And he says, "But Jesus looked at them and said, 'With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible.'" Meaning, God speaks fluent in the impossible. We can't keep walking by what our own eyes are seeing, but instead by faith, because we also know Philippians 4 verses 13 that we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. We are reminded that it is possible only through Jesus. Comparison number 3 is when it's God's voice, it will be confirmed repeatedly. When it's your voice, it will be doubted repeatedly. So God actually won't speak to you about what's next for you if you haven't already organized and demonstrated to him that you can handle what you have now. So why should God give you what you want so badly if what you have now you can't even handle alone? So that's why it's important to pray and ask God to help you handle what you have now so that God can provide you with abundantly more than you can imagine, right? Comparison number 4 is when it's God's voice, it will serve God and his people. When it's your voice, it will serve you and your desires. So you need to understand that God is never wrong and his plans are way greater than you can imagine. Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." So we can take from this whole study today that in order to hear God's voice, we need to eliminate the barriers that are in our lives. So we need to eliminate these distractions and come to a place where we can serve and worship and spend time in God's presence, completely eliminated from any distractions that may be stopping us. Thank you so much for listening to this study. I appreciate everyone that's still here and watching. I pray that you continue to read the word for yourself, study it the same way I've been studying it. If you have any questions, my DMs and messages are available, and I will link below or put in the caption below sources for more information. And like I said, this is where you need all your information. So get yourself a Bible, start reading the Bible, and grow your relationship with God. God bless everyone. Peace.